My true story from California. On Christmas Eve, my daughter said, "There's no space at the table," then gave my chair to her mother-in-law. So I took everything back, starting with the mortgage. Under the soft flicker of Christmas lights, I stood in the kitchen, carefully placing the pumpkin pie onto the oak dining table I had polished with lemon oil last December. That same table once hosted Sunday breakfasts, birthday candles, and late-night talks about college dreams. Now it was a stage, and I had become a backstage prop, unseen, unneeded, and barely tolerated. "Don't act like you built this. You're just the past," my daughter hissed from the living room. The words floated through the hallway, sharp and shameless. I paused, holding the pie dish with both hands as the sentence landed like a slap across my chest. She was speaking to her husband, but she wanted me to hear. "You sacrificed? No one asked you to. Stop using guilt as currency, Mom." She said Mom like it was a burden, like it tasted wrong in her mouth. I am Ruth, 72, a widow for nearly 2 decades, once a woman with a quiet strength, now a ghost drifting between rooms I helped pay for. 15 years ago, after James, my husband, died suddenly from a heart attack, I received a life insurance check for $90,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. Our nest egg, he called it. "If I go first, you'll be safe," he wrote in his will. Scribbled in blue ink on yellow paper I still keep in my drawer. But I did not keep that money for myself. When my daughter Emily and her husband Matt wanted to buy their first house in Northern California, I offered it. "Not a loan, a gift," I said. They were newlyweds, young, struggling. It was what mothers did. They cried and hugged me. Emily said, "You'll never have to worry about anything again, Mom. You'll live with us for the rest of your life." That was the deal. No paperwork, just trust. I moved in 6 months later, into the guest suite downstairs. It was cozy, sunlit in the mornings, with a small rocking chair I brought from my old place and a lamp James gave me on our 30th anniversary. I cooked most nights. I helped raise their first child. I cleaned, folded laundry, and sewed curtains. I asked for nothing, and over the years I watched the gratitude fade into expectation, and expectation dissolve into resentment. By the 10th Christmas in this house, I had learned how to disappear. I stayed quiet when guests came. I smiled when overlooked. I excused myself when laughter turned into inside jokes I was never part of. But tonight, something was different. Emily's voice was louder, sharper, like she was proving a point. I peeked around the corner. The house looked perfect. Glowing lights, jazz music, a roaring fire in the hearth. The guests were her in-laws, Matt's extended family. Well-dressed, loud, drinking red wine and commenting on how modern the decor had become since last year. Emily floated between them, refilling glasses, laughing a little too hard. When Matt's mother, Marilyn, arrived, Emily practically ran to her, hugged her like a celebrity had entered the room. She led her to the dining table, to the chair I usually sat in, the one with the orthopedic cushion I bought after my hip replacement. I had placed it there earlier in the afternoon, thinking no one would mind. Emily pulled it out and patted it. "Here, sit here, Marilyn, best seat in the house." Marilyn sat, looked around, smiled with her lips only. "So charming, dear. Feels like a real home now." I watched, still holding the pie. My feet hurt. My back ached. But more than anything, my heart stung with something heavier than shame. I returned to the kitchen and placed the pie next to the others. No one had noticed I was gone. I looked down at my hands, wrinkled, dry, speckled with flour. These were the same hands that held Emily through her fevers, braided her hair, signed permission slips, and wiped her tears when her first boyfriend cheated on her. These hands had cleaned her vomit, clapped at her graduation, and stitched her wedding dress when it tore the night before her ceremony. But to them, I was now a relic, something they kept around like a dusty piano, silent and heavy. "Mama Ruth," one of the little guests called from the hallway. It was Matt's niece. "Are you the cleaner here?" I smiled gently. "No, sweetie, I just help out sometimes." She nodded, uninterested, and walked away. I turned off the oven, wiped the counter clean, and walked toward the window overlooking the backyard. My breath fogged the glass. Outside, a light drizzle began. The yard I once gardened in had been replaced by a concrete patio with metal chairs. Cold, efficient, sterile. Like the house. Like my place in it. They say holidays bring people together. I say holidays reveal who they have already pushed out. I stayed there, still, watching the rain drip down the glass, listening to the muffled laughter behind me, each giggle peeling another layer off whatever connection I thought we still had. I whispered to no one. James, you would not believe this, and yet some part of me thinks he would, because he once told me, in a tired voice, long before he passed, Ruth, when you give everything, some people forget you had anything to give in the first place. Tonight, I understood exactly what he meant. When Emily was little, I used to wash her hair with warm water boiled over the wood stove. I would test the heat on my wrist, make sure it was just right, and pour it gently over her head as she sat on an upturned bucket. She giggled then, splashing her tiny feet, calling the steam, magic smoke. We were not rich, we barely had enough, but we had each other. Back then, I worked 3 jobs. During the day, I cleaned houses. In the evening, I worked the register at the corner store. And at night, I baked pies and bread for a small diner that paid me mostly in leftovers. I slept in short bursts. I kept the lights on with coupons and prayers. I sold my wedding ring when she got accepted to college. She cried when she found out. I told her it was just a ring, and she was my real jewel. She believed me. I think I did too at the time. Years passed, life happened. Somewhere between her graduation and marriage, something shifted. My opinions became irrelevant, my stories were labeled outdated, my kindness mistaken for obligation. One afternoon, not long before Christmas, I overheard Emily on the phone with a friend. She was in the dining room. I was folding laundry in the hallway. No, I don't think she's coming with us, she said. Honestly, she's exhausting. Always talking about the past, about how hard things were. I get it, but come on, we all have our stuff, she laughed, then added. Besides, Mom's not really a mom, not like Marilyn. Marilyn has class. She still teaches online. She reads real books. My mom just knits and sighs. She hung up. I folded another towel, and another. My hands did not tremble, but inside something crumble, quietly, like the soft crunch of old snow. That evening, Emily came into my room without knocking. She looked around, noticed the framed photo of her as a toddler, and scoffed. You should really update your space, Mom. It feels like a time capsule in here. I nodded. I wanted to say, that photo? It's from the day you said you'd never leave me. But I stayed quiet. She sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through her phone. Then, as if reading a script, she muttered, Look, I know you helped us a lot, but that was a long time ago. Things change. We're trying to modernize. We can't live in a museum. I smiled gently. You mean I do not belong here anymore? She looked up, slightly startled, then shrugged. I did not say that, but maybe you could be more flexible. I nodded again. Flexible. I had bent so far I no longer recognized my own spine. Later that week, I walked into the living room just as Marilyn, Matt's mother, was leaving. She wore a sharp navy blazer, heels, and the kind of perfume that announces itself before she enters the room. Emily kissed her on the cheek. You are such an inspiration, she said. Marilyn glanced at me. Ruth, still doing your knitting? That's sweet. Very quaint, Emily chimed in. Mom loves that old stuff. History and all. She's our family archive. They both laughed, and I joined with a smile I had practiced over decades, the kind that hides the sting behind polite silence. That night, as I lay in bed, I looked up at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me. I thought about James. He used to trace the curve of my hand and whisper, You're the strongest woman I know, Ruth. I closed my eyes and whispered to the dark, I miss you more when I am invisible. This house was once a dream, a sanctuary of promise and second chances. Now, it was a polished prison. Everything gleamed, but nothing glowed. I had become the faded wallpaper they were too polite to rip down. The silence between their sentences. The ghost in the photos they no longer displayed. But I remembered everything. Every diaper changed, every tear wiped, every math test reviewed, every night I sat awake during her fevers, reciting lullabies until dawn. Emily had Marilyn now. A woman with degrees, connections, and charm. I was just the woman who scraped life together out of nothing and called it love. But I was not angry. Not yet. I was remembering, and remembering was the first step to reclaiming. The dining room shimmered under golden lights, every corner of the house glowing in curated elegance. The scent of nutmeg and roasted thyme floated through the air as laughter erupted in waves from the 30-foot table, adorned with fine china, crystal goblets, and cloth napkins folded into swans. Everyone was dressed in their holiday best. Velvet reds, forest greens, silver shimmer. The playlist was tasteful jazz. The wine was flowing. I had just pulled the turkey from the oven, golden brown, glazed to perfection. I had basted it every 20 minutes for 3 hours and garnished the edges with sprigs of rosemary and orange slices. I had made the gravy from scratch, not from a jar like Emily sometimes did. This meal, was my way of contributing. It was my quiet offering to a house that no longer knew what to do with me. I stepped carefully into the dining room, carrying the platter with both hands. My back ached. My left knee throbbed with every step. But I had done this every Christmas for 10 years, and I knew how to move through the crowd unnoticed. Or so I thought. Just as I approached the end of the table, my granddaughter Lily leapt up from her chair. She was 11, wearing a sequined dress too tight for her age and holding a smartphone with a case covered in rhinestones. She spun around, bumped my elbow, and the gravy boat resting beside the turkey tilted. A stream of warm brown gravy splashed across the tablecloth and dripped onto her dress. She screamed, "Grandma, you dropped gravy on my dress. Ugh!" She looked down like I had ruined her life. Then, with a theatrical groan, she raised her phone and hit record. I froze, still holding the turkey. She filmed the stain, then my face, zooming in. Her friends giggled from their side of the table. She laughed too. No apology. No acknowledgement that she had knocked into me. Emily came over. Her heels clicked on the wood like gavel strikes. She looked at Lily, then the table, then me. Her voice was flat, cold. "Mom, seriously, you could not carry one dish without spilling." I set the turkey down gently. My fingers trembled, but I kept them steady. "I was bumped," I said quietly. Emily folded her arms. "You know what? Maybe it's better if you just sit down. Or go rest, honestly. You're kind of all over the place tonight." Before I could respond, Marilyn, Matt's mother, stepped forward. She wore a tailored green pantsuit and a pearl necklace that looked real. She smelled like bergamot and lavender, and her hair was perfectly curled. "Darling," she said to Emily, "why don't I take it from here? Let me serve the turkey. No sense letting things get messier." Emily nodded, grateful. "Thanks, Mom." She said Mom, like it was the only version of the word that mattered. Marilyn took the carving knife from the block on the sideboard. "We shouldn't let old traditions ruin the new ones, right?" That was when I noticed it. My seat. The chair I always sat in. The one with the burgundy cushion I had crocheted myself last year to ease the ache in my hips. It was gone. Or rather, it was taken. Marilyn had already placed her purse under it. Her jacket hung on the back. A glass of wine sat neatly beside her plate, half full. Emily saw me staring. "Mom," she said, not unkindly but firmly, "Marilyn's back has been acting up. She needs the seat with support. You understand?" I nodded. Of course I understood. I had understood when they stopped inviting me to their date nights. I had understood when Lily began calling me Ruth instead of Grandma. I had understood when they moved my knitting basket into the garage to free up space. I understood so well I could have written a manual. I moved toward the kitchen, but someone had already cleared the doorway. I stood at the edge of the dining room, invisible. The turkey was now being carved by Marilyn, praised for its tenderness. No one mentioned who cooked it. Emily laughed at a joke Matt's uncle made. The room buzzed with warmth. I felt none of it. One of the guests, a woman I did not recognize, leaned toward Emily. "That gravy drama was wild," she whispered. "Good thing the real hostess stepped in." Emily smiled. She did not correct her. I returned to the kitchen and sat down on a stool. My hands were still warm from the platter. I rubbed my knees, listening to the clinks of forks and muffled laughter. There were no extra chairs, not that anyone offered. My cushion, the one I made, stitch by stitch, through arthritis and silence, sat beneath someone else, a woman who never folded a napkin in this house, a woman with degrees and designer shoes and perfect posture. I looked at my hands. They had wiped Emily's childhood tears. They had sewn her costumes, baked her birthday cakes, and buttoned her graduation gown. Now they trembled, not from age, but from the realization that I no longer belonged to the table I helped build. The sound of glass clinking interrupted my thoughts. Emily stood with her wineglass raised. "To family," she said, "and to the future." I stayed seated. No one noticed. I sat on the back porch, the kind no one used anymore, since they paved the backyard with gray concrete and bought a fire pit that never got lit. The cold metal chair creaked beneath me as I pulled my cardigan tighter. Rain drizzled down, not heavy enough to drench, but persistent enough to chill through skin and bone. My breath fogged in the air, thin and shallow. My joints ached. Still, no one came. No one asked where I had gone. No one brought me a coat or a blanket. Not even a glance toward the sliding glass door. From the inside, I could hear them clinking glasses. Music swelled, and someone shouted a punchline that sent waves of laughter rolling through the house. They were warm, full, safe. I was 5 feet away, but it might as well have been 500 miles. I looked down at my hands again, wrinkled, spotted, trembling ever so slightly. I flexed my fingers slowly. These hands had held life and death, had gripped steering wheels through rainstorms, and tucked letters of rejection and acceptance into drawers that no one else ever opened. These hands had held Emily the day she was born. These hands had fed her, clothed her, protected her, and pushed her into the world when she was ready. And now these hands sat empty in my lap, forgotten. A gust of wind swept across the porch, and my cardigan lifted slightly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was dim, the glass a little scratched. I unlocked it, scrolled past photos, old meals, blurry sunsets, Emily's wedding, a few grandkid drawings I had saved like treasures. Then I opened the recordings folder. My thumb hovered, then tapped a file I had named with no emotion. Kitchen, April 4. Emily's voice played, clear, sharp. If Mom just died, the house would finally be ours, like really ours. She keeps saying she doesn't need anything, but she's the reason we can't refinance. I'm sorry, but I'm tired of living like we owe her. Silence. Then Matt's voice, lower, more cautious. Babe, you can't say that out loud. Why not? It's the truth. I'm not going to let her guilt me for one more holiday. This house is ours. She gave it up when she handed us that check. She just doesn't know how to leave. I sat still. I had listened to that clip more times than I could count, each time trying to feel something different. Shock, anger, betrayal. But tonight, as the rain tapped its rhythm on the patio roof, I felt nothing. Not broken, just frozen. It was not grief that hardened me. It was clarity, the kind that does not arrive with screaming or tears, but with stillness. Cold, quiet truth. They had not just pushed me away tonight. They had buried me long ago. Everything after that had been ritual, empty gestures, polite silence, obligations dressed up as love. Emily had not seen me in years, not really. She had seen my hands when I served, my feet when I moved aside, my back when I walked away, but not my eyes, not my face, not my heart. The irony was cruel. They said I was old, stuck in the past. But I was the only one in that house who had not forgotten. I remembered everything. I remembered what it meant to give without keeping score. I remembered the cost of love that never asked to be repaid, and I remembered that James had once told me, with tired eyes and warm hands, "Ruth, if they ever forget who you are, you remind them, not with noise, but with truth." A droplet of rain landed on my hand. Then another. I looked up. The sky was the same dull gray I had seen every winter, but this time it did not scare me. It did not weigh me down. It cleared my mind. The laughter inside faded into a hum. I tapped the screen and renamed the file. Reminder. Then I stood up. My knees popped. My back straightened, and I went inside, not to serve, not to ask, but to plan. Because the fire in my chest did not burn with rage, it burned with resolve. By the morning after Christmas, I no longer hoped for apologies. The house was quiet. No one mentioned the night before. They went about their day like it was any other holiday, playing board games, eating leftovers, laughing at reruns on TV. Emily passed me in the hallway once without looking up from her phone. Lily never said a word. Matt nodded vaguely from across the kitchen island, like I was the cleaning lady who showed up without being called. I did not argue. I did not ask questions. Instead, I opened the locked drawer in my nightstand and took out the red folder I had kept hidden for years. Inside were printouts of emails, screenshots of texts, even a few photos of whiteboards from family budget meetings where my name and living expenses had been listed like liabilities. I had recorded everything, not because I planned to use it, but because I needed to remember I was not imagining it. And now it was time. I called Edward. He had been my husband's closest friend, his fishing buddy, his quiet confidant. After James passed, Edward checked in once or twice a year. We had not spoken much in recent times, but I knew he was still practicing law, elder rights, wills, estate litigation. When I called, I did not have to explain everything. I said, "Edward, I need help." He replied, "Where do you want to meet?" We met 2 days later in a small office above a bakery in Sonoma. The air smelled like cinnamon and fresh yeast, a strange comfort for what I was about to do. Edward looked older, grayer, but his eyes still held that steady warmth. He listened without interrupting as I laid out everything, my contribution to the house, the verbal agreement with Emily and Matt, the isolation, the recordings. Then I pulled out the document, James's original will, signed and notarized 15 years ago. In his handwriting, the insurance policy shall ensure Ruth's permanent and unconditional residence in the family home or equivalent accommodations of her choosing, until her death or by her own decision. Edward read it twice. Then he looked up. "Do they know this exists?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I never told them. I didn't think I'd need to." He sighed, folded his hands. "You do now." We talked for hours. He explained my options, not just as a wronged parent, but as a legally protected elder. "You have grounds, Ruth. This isn't just hurt feelings, it's financial exploitation, emotional neglect, possibly even coercion. You are not powerless." For the first time in a long time, I felt less alone. I asked him about something I had read online months earlier, on one of those late nights when I could not sleep, and searched phrases like rights of elderly homeowners and what to do when family betrays you. The Elder Justice Center, a nonprofit legal body that helps seniors reclaim stolen assets, fight abuse, and protect their living rights. I had bookmarked their website but never contacted them until now. Edward made the call on my behalf, arranged a meeting, walked me through the paperwork. Then, in his office with the cinnamon-scented air, I signed the authorization to begin legal proceedings and transfer temporary control of the property to the Elder Justice Center, pending investigation. This was no revenge. This was reclamation. I wasn't trying to ruin Emily. I wasn't trying to humiliate her or take back Christmas or make anyone cry. I was simply done pretending I was powerless in a home I helped build. As I signed the last page, Edward looked at me and said, "You've waited a long time, Ruth." I replied, "I'm done waiting." When I walked out of that office, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a woman who had finally remembered her own name. I drove back in silence, wind pressing against the side of the car. The vineyard roads were quiet, gray, solemn. My hands did not tremble. My breath did not quicken. I had already mourned what I lost. Now I was choosing what to claim. And I had just begun. On the morning of January 2nd, the frost had not yet melted off the windows when the envelope arrived. A courier dropped it at the front door, rang the bell, and left. Emily found it, tore it open while still in her robe, and read it in the middle of the kitchen. I was pouring myself a cup of tea in silence when I heard the gasping sound, half shock, half rage. "What the hell is this?" she spat. She waved the document in the air like a warning flag, but it was already too late. The order was sealed by the court, signed by a judge, and backed by an investigative request from the Elder Justice Center. The house was now under temporary asset freeze, a legal mechanism that halted any refinancing, sale, or property transfers until a full review could be conducted. Attached were allegations that struck like thunder: emotional elder abuse, financial exploitation, violation of a binding testamentary document. Emily's hands shook. Matt came into the room moments later, phone in hand, already calling their lawyer. I sat quietly at the table, stirred honey into my tea. Emily turned toward me, eyes wide with disbelief and betrayal. "You're suing us!" she shouted. "Are you out of your mind?" "No," I replied calmly. "I am finally in my right mind." "You're trying to destroy your own family. Over what? Some stupid chair? A holiday dinner gone wrong?" She was pacing now, wild and loud. Matt lowered the phone. "The letter says the will was specific, that the money from her husband's insurance was contingent on permanent residence." Emily turned back to me, fury rising. "You're doing this to us? After everything? You're going to kill us with paperwork?" I looked her straight in the eyes, the same eyes I used to wipe tears from when she skinned her knees. "No," I said. "I'm not trying to kill anything. I'm just taking back the seat you pulled out from under me." There was no yelling after that, just quiet, and the shuffling of papers on a countertop that had once been my baking space. That same afternoon I packed my things. Not many, just clothes, a few books, the photo of James and me on our anniversary trip to Monterey. My hands moved slowly, not because I was old, but because I had waited too long to move at all. The moving van from the boutique retirement community arrived just before dusk. It was a place called Rosewood Grove, not fancy, but warm, quiet, full of other people like me, women with long memories and silent dignity, men who had once commanded rooms and were now content commanding sunbeams and crossword puzzles. When I stepped into my new room, corner suite, bay window, bookshelf already prepared with large print editions, I felt something I had not in years. Space. They gave me a tour, showed me the garden, the activity board, the communal dining room with real cloth napkins and a pianist every Sunday. "Welcome, Mrs. Ruth," the director said. "We're honored to have you. Not burdened, not obligated, not taking up space, honored." That night, as I unpacked, I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Emily. "Mom, I can't believe you'd do this. Marilyn is furious. Lily's been crying all day. Do you know how this makes us look? Do you care at all what happens to us now?" I listened in the dark, tucked under a quilt I had made with James decades ago. "You could have just talked to me," she said. "But no, you went straight to lawyers, to strangers." There was a pause, then the final line. "You're going to die alone in that place, you know." I deleted the voicemail, because I already knew something she did not. I was not alone. I had Edward, the Justice Center, the memories of what I had done for others, and now, finally, something no one could strip from me, my self-respect. The next morning, a staff member knocked on my door. "Mrs. Ruth, we heard you used to make pumpkin pie from scratch. Would you like to teach a baking class next week?" I smiled, not the polite kind, the real kind, the one that warms from the chest. "Yes," I said, "I think I would." And just like that, I was no longer the woman on the porch in the rain. I was someone again. Not Mom, not cleaning lady, not in the way. I was Mrs. Ruth, and I was just getting started. At Rosewood Grove, I became known not for what I had lost, but for what I carried with me. They called me the lady with the yarn. At first, it started with my scarves. I knitted them in the lounge by the fireplace, and soon other residents began to request them. Blue for Mary, who missed the ocean, mustard yellow for Harold, who said it reminded him of autumn leaves in Michigan. They wore them like they wore their stories, softly, proudly, but it was not just the yarn, it was the way I spoke, the way I listened, the way I remembered things other people tried to forget. Every Sunday afternoon I would sit in the common room and share stories, not loud, not dramatic. It's true, the kind of truth that settles like a stone in your chest. They asked me questions. They leaned in when I spoke. No one rolled their eyes. No one sighed and said, "Oh, she's talking about the past again." For the first time in years, my voice was not just heard, it was wanted. One afternoon, as I was pouring tea for a small gathering of residents, the head nurse leaned over and smiled. "Mrs. Ruth," she said, "you have such grace. Everyone feels it when you're around." I nodded politely, but inside, something softened, something repaired. That night, I sat by my window watching the lights twinkle across the garden. A soft jazz record played down the hall. I thought of the chair, the one I had lost, the one that had sparked everything, the cushion I had stitched by hand, the seat that was never really about comfort, but about place, about presence, about being seen. And now, in this new place, I had a different kind of chair. It did not sit at the head of a holiday table. It sat in the circle of women who knew silence, who knew sacrifice, who knew what it meant to be erased and to write themselves back into the page. I opened my drawer and pulled out a card. It was simple, white with gold lettering. Merry Christmas. I wrote, slowly and clearly, my hand steady. Emily, you have the house now. You have the chair. You have the reputation. You have the people. You even have the story you like to tell. But I kept the one thing you cannot buy, the one thing you never earned, the one thing I gave to others here, and they returned without asking. Respect, Mom. I sealed it, addressed it, left it at the front desk for mailing. Then I made myself a cup of tea and added a touch of cinnamon, just how James used to drink it, and I sat. Not on the porch, not outside looking in, but here, where I belonged. I rewrote my will on a Thursday afternoon, sitting in the quiet of my new room at Rosewood Grove. The sun was streaming through the window, warming the blanket on my lap, and the sound of a distant piano carried in from the common room. It was not a grand decision, not bitter, just clear. I gave everything to Kara. She was my niece's daughter, not close by blood, but close in heart. She called me once a month, every month, without fail. Not for money, not for favors, just to say, Auntie Ruth, I miss you. She asked about my knitting, about my favorite books, about how I was feeling. She sent me drawings when she was 12, playlists when she was 15, and letters, real ones, when she started college. I left her the savings I had left, the car, the jewelry box with James's watch inside, and the journals, 27 of them, written in the quiet hours when no one listened. And I left her the house, once it was recovered from litigation and legally cleared, not because it was big or beautiful, but because she would never see it as hers, only as something to protect. A week later, Emily showed up at the front desk of Rosewood Grove. She wore sunglasses and a long coat, as if shielding herself from recognition or memory. The nurse came to my door. Miss Ruth, your daughter is here. I did not rise. I folded the shawl around my shoulders, turned my face back to the window and said, Tell her I'm resting. The nurse hesitated, then nodded and left. I handed her a postcard I had prepared weeks ago, just in case. On it I had written, a small chair, one Christmas, one family lost everything. No anger, no blame, just truth. Some losses are not loud, they echo, forever. 2 years after the court case settled, a letter arrived. It was plain, no return address. The handwriting stopped me cold. The curve of the R in Ruth was unmistakable. I had traced that handwriting across birthday cards, report cards, and desperate scribbles from middle school diaries. It was Emily. I sat in my chair, the one the staff now called Ruth's throne, and opened the envelope with slow, steady hands. Mom, if you're reading this, I guess you're still alive. Not in my life, but in the world. Labor response. The first line pierced sharper than any blade. I don't know where to begin. I won't pretend I didn't say those things. I won't lie and say I didn't think them. But after the house was frozen, after Marilyn moved back to Florida, after Matt lost his job and Lily had to transfer schools, I realized something. It wasn't the money we lost. It was the foundation, and you were the foundation, Mom. We just never treated you like one, she wrote of a Christmas Eve the year before, when they sat around a folding table in a rented apartment, microwaving stuffing and pretending it tasted the same. When I pulled out a box marked kitchen stuff, I found the scarf you knitted. Still smelled like cinnamon. I couldn't throw it away. She ended the letter with no plea, no begging, just truth. You didn't destroy us, Mom. We did that ourselves. You just stopped holding the walls up, and the roof fell. I folded the letter carefully. I did not cry. I placed it in the drawer beside James's wedding photo, tucked between the journals and the final will. I did not write back, Because some wounds do not need stitching. They need air, and memory, and to be left alone. And that was the story of a chair. Not a throne, not a pedestal, just a quiet seat at the table that meant everything. Sometimes, all it takes is one cold Christmas to show you who never meant to keep you warm. But when silence is met with silence long enough, it begins to echo with truth. And in that echo, some of us find our voice again, not to shout, but to say, clearly, I was here, I mattered, and I remember everything. If this story stirred something in you, if you know the weight of invisible sacrifice or the silence after betrayal, then you've found the right porch to sit on. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where forgotten voices speak, not for pity, but for clarity. Because wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers. And when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.